Good afternoon, everyone. Wanted to start off by reminding you that the usual online streaming and video recording is underway, so if you're bashful, please stay out of range of the cameras. I noticed from checking the table that we have a quorum. I'd like to ask our secretary to be the taskmaster for today. John, would you please be the timekeeper for open forum comment? I believe all the members of the board have a copy of the proposed agenda. There are copies for the audience on the table at the back. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Moved by Herm Hess, seconded by John Felton. All in favor? Aye. Agenda is adopted. The next item on the agenda is the members' open forum. I checked the mic and I think it's active. So those of you that would like to offer comments in the open forum, please step forward.
Somebody has to test the mic. There we go. Noel Lyons, Hillsdale Drive. What I'd like to do is address you as a member of the board that moved the staff into the current rental space under a 5-year lease. And at that time, the board realized that 5 years isn't very long. And the OVA should look ahead to 2015. The economy was improving and office space could become scarce. Our facilities seemed to be in good shape, except for Lower West for locker rooms. At the time, planning for an OVA office building made sense. Now, fast forward to 2013. The real estate market is weak with lots of available office space, and meanwhile, we've learned of major weaknesses throughout our recreation facilities, including bathrooms and decks at East, seismic deficiencies in those pesky locker rooms at West, system problems at Berger, and so forth. Plans that looked prudent under the committee's original charter now look like the solution to the wrong problem. According to the Articles of Incorporation, the specific and primary purpose of the OVA is, quote, to provide athletic and recreational and club facilities for members and their guests. We're primarily a volunteer organization with only a few employees who have their hands full with day-to-day tasks. There are only very limited resources available for extra projects. This helps explain why obviously important jobs take so long to complete. Under the circumstances, it only makes sense for us to exercise the extension option on our office lease and defer any new building until after major repairs and improvements have been completed. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Noel.
Andy Altman, Oak Shadow Drive. I would like to take this opportunity to ask the Board of Directors to pause and postpone the building of the Central Business Center until our current recreational facilities are restored and a comprehensive business analysis that evaluates all salient points comparing construction to other options is revisited and then shared with the membership. With potentially millions of dollars in needed renovations of our rec centers and countless hours of effort ahead, I urge you as our elected directors to reevaluate the association's priorities and then provide us with a good business decision based on what an ordinarily prudent person in a like position would do under similar circumstances. And finally, please consider sharing your decision and reasons with the membership in a transparent way that would be beneficial to the association in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Joan Steiger. I live on Oak Brook Lane. I want to thank the board, first of all, for the new... I would like to thank the board, first of all, for the new manager of the maintenance that they have hired, he is far superior to the former person. I think at this time, our needs in Oakmont are not for a new building. I think at this time, the board needs to address all the problems that this whole area is facing. We have a pool at the West Rec with a heater, at least one heater, that is not working. We have so many problems at the West Rec. I don't think the board even knows where to begin with at all. And at the East, the bathrooms have not been finished. It's been more than 6 months. There are just a lot of things that this board needs to do that they are not doing. It's not okay to have bathrooms not fixed for 6 months and then talk about building a new building. It's not something that needs to be happening at this time. We've got landscaping at all 3 buildings that looks hideous. There's weeds growing, there's dead plants, and nothing's been done, and it's looked like this for a lot of years. The board should be conducting site inspections of Oakmont once a month with the property manager. Notes should be taken and things need to be corrected and taken care of, and this is not happening, and it's not okay. The board spending money to have the parking lot here restriped, and I'm wondering how long it's going to be before people are running into each other out there. If you see them driving around here, you know darn well they need bigger spots to park, not smaller ones. The board, I think, is unable to cope with a lot of the scope of what it's got on its agenda right now, and that's understandable because there's a lot. I think it's more than ever. And I think a lot of us in Oakmont would prefer that the board take care of business like the problems that they're facing and not start a brand new huge project such as a new building right now. If the board continues to follow this procedure of doing a new building, going ahead with it, there's very likely going to be some legal action occurring with residents against the board on this whole thing. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Virginia Katz and I live at 7382 Oakmont Drive. Today, Oakmont is at a crossroads. At 50 years old, Oakmont has some very pressing needs, such as projects to fix the East Side rec locker rooms, the daunting project to correct the West Side area, and maintenance of amenities such as bocce ball courts, tennis courts, swimming pools, and spas, the administration of OVA, including hiring and supervisory roles, and providing amenities in the future that will be in demand by our residents, such as pickleball, basketball, and an area for grandchildren to play. I have served prior on an ad hoc committee to identify residents that may want to serve on the board. The one thing I've heard over and over again is that serving on the board is a full-time job. And with the amount of work that will need to be done now and in the future, I can see why those who may want to run for the board are put off. This OVA board has quite a full plate, and now there is real evidence that yet another major project is on slate, the building of a new standalone building called the CBC that in theory would house the new OVA and 6 employees that serve us. But here's the problem. All the above projects need full supervision from the board level, and that in itself is a full-time job for board members. We have just hired a new property manager, Ms. Turner, and it will take a period of time for her to get up to speed. I am asking this board to put the building of CBC on the back burner until immediate projects are completed. In fact, with all the work that needs to be done and the future projects that are slated, I highly recommend that the OVA board hire and/or contract a project manager to work with this board for a period of at least 2 years. That project manager can take on today's projects as well, such as the East and Rec Centers and the other projects that need attention today. This project manager will have continuity over 2 years, so even if the makeup of the board changes, which it will, OVA will have a project manager to make sure these projects are completed in a timely way. Project managers can help with the permit process, keeping pressure on the city of Santa Rosa, help with budgeting for the amenities, and can also give a holistic picture of what needs to be done and a timeline for completion of those projects. If and when a CBC is built, the project manager can watch out for OVA interests and monitor the construction of that project. As a member of First Things First, I want this board to know that I am not against the thought of new digs for the OVA employees. What I do advocate is that OVA Board of Directors addresses the immediate needs of this community first. And when those projects are completed, the board, with the help of a project manager, can see what monies are left to build a new home for the OVA employees. And at that time, an open and transparent discussion between the OVA Board of Directors and the residents can be held to figure out if, when, and where a new CBC should be built. We only have one more build out for Oakmont, the Meadows. The Meadows will bring over $500,000 in impact fees.
Thank you, Virginia.
Good afternoon, my name's Mike Harris. I'm on Oakleaf Drive, the current fitness club vice president and former president. I recently removed a petition that I posted in the fitness center. And at this point, I'd like to say thank you to Kathy Doherty for a timely distribution and sending the petition and display to our board of directors, and to Herm Hess for taking the time to call me personally to discuss this important issue. The petition concentrates on the location of the proposed CBC, which will compromise our open view of the surrounding hills and light looking westward from our gym. 303 of the 305 signatures were in favor of maintaining this open space. I'm not a great fan of petitions, but I did want to show that there is a widespread opposition to this project, rather than just a few rebellious malcontents as suggested by some proponents of the building. I was also disappointed to read the negative comments in our newsletter from Ms. Turner, our new manager, who stated, and I'll quote to avoid any misrepresentation, "One of the main issues in managing an adult community is people with too much time on their hands. They can become very negative if they don't like a decision made by the board of directors. As a result, they take up everyone's time, being obstructive instead of helping to work towards a solution. To imply that Oakmont, with well over 100 plus clubs and organizations run entirely by Oakmont residents, in addition to many supporting various Sonoma volunteer groups, have too much time on their hands is premature and insulting. The board of directors are our elected representatives, and we have an obligation to get involved in decisions that affect all Oakmont residents. I'm in favor of providing a pleasant, comfortable, and efficient workplace for our employees. But meanwhile, there's much work to be done now. I appreciate the work that you board of directors commit to our community, but I think you have far too much on your plate. I suggest the proposed building be put on hold and revisited at a later date until the current must-do projects are completed, and then reevaluate how much we can reasonably afford to spend, the size and the location of the CBC. And I might add, just listen to Virginia, that the proposal to employ an experienced project manager is very well worth considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
My name is Alan Scott, Woodley Way. I am personally vehemently opposed to placing a new office building on what should be parkland and is now open space. We don't have much open space in the main area, and it would be a pity to lose it to an office building. As a result of my opposition, I looked for an alternative, and particularly I investigated a beauty salon, which had also been investigated previously by the OVA. The building is between the fire station, McBride Realty, and the barber shop, and by the delicatessen. It has a good entrance. It has 27 large parking places. It has the access to other parking places that could be rented. It is about 2,200 square feet. It's ample space for an office, a small conference room. And as an aside, if we need more conference rooms, we can do an addition to an existing building, an existing rec center, or build a separate, smaller building, 500 to 1,000 square feet. That could be a real statement rather than a very utilitarian structure in the middle of what should be park. I investigated this matter and found out that the OVA had an appraisal done by Barham and Associates. They found the building to be in good shape. They found it to be easily modified. They found it to be easily upgraded. It is the same age as the Burger Center, the deli, the barbershop at Bright. It's the same age as the building we're using right now. I approached the Burger Foundation, Burger, which owns the property. The Burger Foundation is a $500,000 company. I made a written presentation to Douglas Vance, who is the vice president in charge of real estate. He passed that, my written presentation. I'm sorry. He passed that written presentation to the board. The board then allowed Mr. Vance to talk to me about the possibilities of negotiations. The price we sort of talked around was not as high as the appraisal that OVA had done. The terms, he said, could be made extremely flexible and very...
Your time's expired.
I beg your pardon? It could be made extremely flexible.
I said your time's expired, I'm sorry.
Can't hear?
I can hear. Your time is expired.
Oh, okay. It is a good alternative to literally cars to land.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Goodwin, Old Oak Lane. Please consider this reason why our Greensward should become a park, not the site for administrative offices with more meeting rooms. I stand before you today to remind everyone of neighbors whose needs and well-being are at times unintentionally overlooked by this community and its leaders. In fact, there are approximately 175 dues-paying Oakmont Garden residents who could greatly benefit from decisions made by the current and future OVA Board of Directors. For a good portion of the garden residents, walking is their primary exercise. Many require the use of canes, walkers, and other devices for assistance. Outside, they take short walks around their apartments, to the library, fitness center, burger center, and the Saturday farmers market. Sadly, there is no nearby, easily accessible park for them to spend time enjoying the company of family, visiting friends, and neighbors. Studies by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Penn State University, and the Project on Human Development in Chicago Neighborhoods all allowed parks as places for both individual and community health. Health benefits of gathering to get fresh air and sunshine help reduce stress and blood pressure levels. Proper time in sunlight increases the body's hormonal levels, making one more active and alert. The most beneficial part of sunshine exposure is increased vitamin D levels, which research indicates promotes healthy bones and prevents various cancers. Right here, right now, I believe is a defining moment for Oakmont's decision makers. You have the opportunity to do something special for all Oakmont residents, especially those in the twilight of their years at the gardens. Give thought to this concept. Building community doesn't mean constructing another structure. Finally, I would like you to be aware that standing up in front of an audience, expressing your point of view, takes courage. I I know that if my father was still alive and living in the gardens, he would be proud of me for stating my case. The question I leave you with is, would your father be proud of the decisions you will make regarding the open space known as Art Greensward? Thank you.
My name is Ken Steuben, and I live at 422 Woodley Way. I recently passed a milestone of sorts in my life and have now begun my 27th year in Oakmont. Time enough to have witnessed a number of good things happen and a few that were not so good. One of the best things, and something we could all be proud of, was the remodeling and expansion of the Central Activities Center. This project involved input from many Oakmonters and required several iterations over the years before it was finished. It was a model of what could be accomplished with good communication, cooperation, and a willingness to compromise. And now we're wrestling not only with the design of the proposed central office meeting room complex, but its location as well. So despite the considerable effort that's gone into this project so far, many people still feel that we have more to do. What am I concerned about? Well, to construct another meeting room with those we already have stand unused for several hundreds of hours each month is unwarranted in my view. Removal of this room from the plan alone would reduce the footprint of the proposed building and may allow construction in a different location than first proposed. I believe that the grassy area targeted for this construction would be better used as a welcoming centerpiece to our community in the form of a small landscape park, as opposed to filling every bit of open space with buildings. If further analysis and discussion concludes that we have to construct the CBC on the lawn, I would be all for it, but I'm not quite there yet. Our community has a number of tasks needing attention. I won't go through them again because obviously they've been covered just before me. And it's especially important to get this one right. So a pause for more discussion on the issues that I and others have mentioned seems essential to me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ken.
Eleanor Brodmansky, Oakmont Drive. I had a copy of the Lori Kagwin architectural drawing for the Greensward. And Yvonne Horn from our landscape committee is going to show it. And we'll put it up in the back when we're through. What I have to say is, first of all, I'm not opposed to a new office facility for the OPA staff. I just object to the location being proposed on the Greensward. I represent the Landscape Improvement Committee, and we unanimously object to this location. 2 years ago, we submitted ideas to create a park-like area to be enjoyed by all residents, and at the same time to conserve water as mandated by the City of Santa Rosa. Concept drawing of all the open areas around the Burger by Lori Kagwin, landscape architect, was displayed here in the Burger. But attention was given to the plaza because of the deteriorating cement. The Greensward was to be phase 2 of this project, and we were not informed or consulted when we were blindsided with plans for this strip mall type building that plops right down on the beautiful open space. There must be a better alternative. Oakmont doesn't have a park, and that is truly a shame that one was never considered here. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor.
I'm Nancy Caldwell from Mountain Vista Court, and I'm here as the person who originated the community forum a little while back in the hopes that we could have more information given to us. As you know, or many of you must know, we had an excellent turnout. We had to add more chairs for everybody that wanted to come. And the video that was taken then at my expense and a few others that donated was put online. The board of directors did only videos these meetings, not the workshops either. I've hoped time and time again that more things would be transmitted to us as information about what the plans are, what the ideas were, what they plan to do in the future. There's been very little transparency about what's going on behind the scenes. And at this point, instead of being disappointed as I was, I'm beginning to get angry. I really wish more information would be put out more directly about what they are thinking of doing. Not that they've done, not that they've made decisions about, but what they're thinking about, so that we can think about it ourselves. We're not stupid. We have the ability to think and state our opinions, but we need to know what's in the planning. And so please, at this point, I would urge you to, again, as others have said, fix the things that need fixing first, because there are too many of them. And there's too many things to be done to do the CBC at this point, and do not build that building on the green grass that I agree that would make a wonderful garden. I cannot believe that there is no other place that would work for a new building, which I don't think that the employees are entitled. I mean, I do think that they are entitled to. They don't need to sit there and watch ants crawl around their desks and whatever else the comments were. Sorry, I'm not being very articulate today. But anyway, I do hope they would be more transparent, give us more idea of what they're thinking. Thank you.
William Biggs, Stone Creek Circle. After listening to these constructive and really objective comments this morning, something that I have been concerned with, but now that we've listened to these comments this morning, I have one more to make, and that is the restriping of the parking lot from 45 degrees to 60 degrees. Is it appropriate, especially if you were not to build a new building, to try and restripe the parking lot? I have questions whether, because of demographics of this community, whether we're really to get 22 more parking spaces, it's worth the effort. So I'm adding that comment to the ones that we've already had this morning. Hopefully, especially if we do not build a building, that we keep the remaining striping at 60 degrees, or excuse me, 45 degrees rather than 60. That's it.
Good afternoon, my name is Arthur Boot. I live at 6394 Meadow Ridge Drive, and I'd just like to inform the community on a little history of what's been going on regarding priorities and money being spent in Oakmont. During the tenure of the now defunct Facility Improvement Committee, a project was proposed in 2010. That project went forward, and in 2000, with a lot of discrepancies and back and forth one way or another, in 2012 it was recommended to the Finance Committee, which then approved the funds were available to complete that project. That project was the West Center locker rooms, male and female. At that point, a forensic report came into being, and the project obviously was put on hold, except that Archaeologics, an architectural company, were brought in, unbeknownst to the FIC, and they were asked to design a new standalone bathroom for the West Center at considerable expense. Now, all I'm asking, I have no objections to new office buildings or location once we all decide on what's the best for the community. But I think it's time that we're all involved in what's going on in the community. And it's not necessarily the priorities of the board, but the priorities of the community. It doesn't matter that the West came and went, unfortunately, and we're no further along, and that's 3 years that we've lost, unfortunately. But I want the board to consider that this is not a negative response. It's just the fact that I think we have to look at priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Art.
My name is Richard Duncan, 8851 Hood Mountain Way. And I would like to thank the board for their patient listening to the community this afternoon. I have an inclination now and again to make a poem, and I have one prepared one for you guys today. It's called First Things First. Good friends of mine have said it's time to find some words and make a rhyme. Compose a verse to help reverse the flow of funds to be dispersed. On that grand plan at CBC, it's just not wise, we all agree. Let's reconsider it in reverse. Make sure we're thinking first things first. We'd like to make some things quite clear. We've not been drinking wine or beer. Indeed, we mean no disrespect, nor do we want to disconnect. You do great work and spend long hours, missing time to smell those flowers. And we ask, is that you heed? I wish that we be all agreed. Because you see, we get this feeling. That's why we're here and now appealing. Despite our calls for due precaution, responses seem like some contortion. With so much work that must be done, let's do it first, it's just begun. Let's keep those funds before they're spent, extend the lease and pay less rent. You may recall Access report. It lists repairs we can support. And they alone will cost $2 million. At CDC, another $1 million. Your raison d'etre is recreation. White elephants now just cause frustration. We're not against new office space, just not that Greensward special space. It's much too soon to build more room, deplete accounts and funds consumed. Let's take some time to heed this rhyme and give us a chance to all opine. But save this thought, you can be sure that CBC has no allure. To desecrate that open space, that would be one untold disgrace. And so if our humble pleas ignored, you can be sure it will be deplored. We hope you will our faithful restore, devise a plan we can adore. Admit this building's a mistake, one we can now all forsake. We hope you will apply the brake. Our trust in you is what's at stake. So to conclude, without being rude, we'd rather not have too intrude. We're not a rabid way-out crowd making noise that's way too loud.
Let it go, John.
We're just the guy who lives next door, paying her dues and keeping score. That CBC is just the worst. Let's start again. First things first. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. We have time for just one more open forum comment before we need to get to the business.
One quick comment, if I could, John.
Yes.
I'm always amazed how Rich can come up with a poem on any single subject.
And almost immediately. Thank you, Rich.
And to think I have to follow him. My name is Donna Hopley. I live at 6421 Mesa Oaks Place. And I'm sorry I'm late. I actually do have a flat tire. And I have missed some of the comments that have already been made by our very concerned residents. I know at the last board meeting I attended, it was a very responsible and well-informed resident that made the comment that instead of the 50 cents that our treasurer suggested, we put in the reserve fund, that we increase our dues by $2.50, which would bring it up to $100,000. As I look at some of the dollars that have crossed my computer and see that there are expenses ranging from $2 million to $3 million of possible monies that we need to expend in the near future. So I'm asking you today, and I think I saw on the agenda under, or was it 10E, to vote on restriping and repairing the parking lot, to put that on hold until we can come to a consensus in our community. I do want to thank the board for all the work you've done. I have talked to some of you, and I realize that you put in lots of hours. So thank you.
Thank you, Donna. I'm sure the board, along with me, appreciates all the thoughtful comments and the way they were presented today. I hope you understand that we listen and think about all that you offer us. But I would like to go on with the regular items of the agenda now. That is the business of the association that we need to address. And I'll ask the secretary to provide a summary of our executive meeting minutes.
The executive meeting occurred on October 15th, and everyone was present. We began the meeting at 3:50 p.m. The first issue was the discussion of what had occurred during the open session regarding an appeal by Noel and Joni Schween regarding an architectural decision. The board voted to deny the appeal of the residents and uphold the decision of the architectural committee, and the board ordered the resident to remove the windmill palm planted without architectural committee approval. President Taylor was to write a letter requiring compliance by December 2nd, 2013. The second item was a delinquent account involving a residence occupied by a number of individuals, resulting in confusion regarding the amount of dues of the association. After discussion, the board voted to write off the balance of the money due and advise the owner of their primary responsibility for payment of all dues in the future. Finally, there were 4 delinquent accounts, which the board voted unanimously to file liens against. And then, there was some discussion regarding the Central Plaza contract because no permits were issued. That meant no action was taken. The meeting adjourned at 4:35 p.m.
Thank you, Secretary. Item 5 calls for recognition, and I'm hoping that our magazine publisher, Ed Bain, is in the back of the room. Ed, won't you come up here, please? As you all know, we've been celebrating a 50th anniversary year with lots of festive activities, and we had the pleasure of recognizing the co-chairmanship of those active activities 2 months ago in the form of Bob Chapman and Susan Millar. But it was only at the beginning of this month that we had the pleasure to see the handiwork of lots and lots of people, but the brainchild and spearhead of Ed Bain in putting together the beautiful magazine. And so we'd like to conclude this 50th year celebration activity by presenting to you, Ed, a Community Service Award for publishing the commemorative magazine as Oakmont celebrates its 50 years. With admiration and appreciation for your months of hard work and your long hours, in addition to your marketing skill and technical proficiency in bringing to our community a beautiful 50th anniversary commemorative magazine.
This is a big surprise. I'm not using the mic, but I'll speak up. This all started with Dick Starr, and at that time I was the chair of the communication group And it was envisioned, I will, okay. It was envisioned to be 32 pages, and I said I would help Dick because I do a little bit about printing. I'd taken it in junior high school, but I was willing to join him, and that's how it all started. And then because of his health issues, he's asked me to take over, of which I did, and I had no idea how much that would take out of my time. At the very end, Jim, who was helping me at the very end, he used to work in the newspaper business, and he says, it's crunch time. And it was, and we got it delivered to my house by the owner of Barlow Printing, Pat, on Halloween morning. And so I want to thank everyone that has bought one or is thinking about buying one. They're available. They'll be at the back there, and Jim is back there with me to sell them to you if you'd like to. It's coming along great, and so I'm very happy with the outcome of what it was, but it was a challenge. Thank you.
I might add to Ed's comments, along with the report that Susan Millar gave us 2 months ago, that both of these activities, the actual celebration activities as well as the magazine, were perhaps considered by skeptics to be something that would cost the association money. But if you look at the current month's financial report, the 50th celebration revenue was over $25,000, and it covered all the expenses of that celebration. And the magazine revenue from the sale of advertisements plus contributions from residents has raised $21,220, which covers the full cost of producing the magazine. It certainly doesn't compensate for the hours of labor that went into do it, but in fact, the revenue that comes from the sale of each magazine at $7.50 continues to be revenue for the association in the future. We have the consent calendar as the next item on the agenda. Regarding item C1, the Zumba Dance Fusion class, the Secretary has raised questions as to whether or not activities like this are the type that the association should begin to expect, what's your words?
Instructors and classes to be certified for CPR.
I mean, CPR, thank you, CPR. My mindset didn't bring up CPR. One of the recommendations for the ad hoc committee that looked into defibrillators was to raise the question of whether or not our association should move forward in some fashion for CPR requirements for classes that are being held. That is not part of what is on today's agenda as far as the consent calendar is concerned, but it is an item that we should have in our minds as far as future consideration for this kind of thing is concerned. The other item on the agenda is a resignation of 2 valuable people from our architectural committee, and I'd like to comment in terms of Andrea Altman, who you heard speak earlier today appropriately, and voting member Tom Rodella, that I believe our association is indebted to the kind of hours that those individuals put in. Bert, you have?
I just had a question on the page 19 on our consent calendar. I don't...
Pardon me, point of order. If we're going to have discussions on the consent calendar, shouldn't we have a motion to approve, and second it, then have our discussion?
Thank you, Jim, you're correct. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Fran moves. Do I have a second? Herm Hess. All in favor of accepting the consent calendar?
No.
Pardon me. I'm going too fast. I apologize. It's now time for discussion.
I don't really have a discussion, I just have a question, is what this is and why it's there, and there's no explanation, it's just a piece of paper in our...
Which one are you talking about, Herm?
He's talking about Sonoma County Regional Park.
The Natural Hazard Disclosure Report for Sonoma County. Page 19.
It's part of the OCDC minutes report. I shouldn't.
They appear to be attachments to the OCDC minutes.
Well, I don't see any comment in their minutes about that.
Well, one of the things that the OCDC, upon me reading the minutes, was the fact they were worried that they were going to work with the Sonoma Valley people and talk about more construction on Highway 12 for traffic. And the traffic, what they're talking about, is impeding fire trucks and access for the fire department. And I think that has something to do with it, fire and hazardous materials and stuff like that. That's the only thing I can think of.
It still makes no sense to me.
Let's follow up the meeting today by asking to clarify, which I will put on our taskmaster list to do.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question concerning 6F1, the Zuma Dance Fusion class. The way it's written, and I want to make sure I understand it correctly, this individual is wanting to actually generate 2 new classes of Zuma, is that right? And with that, they would shut down the class identified as NIA. Is that my understanding?
I don't have... Kathy, can you clarify for us, please?
Yes. Well, yeah, it says that the qualification, well, use of facilities by our current class, NIA, and replace them with this class. Okay.
So it sounds like 1 for 1, Jim.
1 for 1, okay. Just making sure that, but so then whenever we have our list of groups and everything like that, they'll be taken off the list. Well, I just want to make sure because it rarely happened in the past. And next thing you know, we got a list of 300 clubs when in fact we only have 125 or 150 actually being used, all right? So I'm just trying to make sure that it stays updated.
Thank you. Any other discussion of the consent calendar? Okay, now I say, all in favor of accepting the consent calendar? Motion passes. And we have the treasurer's report, please. Chuck?
For the month of October, we had revenues of $168,000 with expenses of $146,000, leaving us with a surplus of $23,000 for the month. On a year-to-date basis, revenue was $1,703,000, expenses $1,560,000, leaving us a surplus of $143,000. Transfers to the funds were all equal to or better than budget. With sales of new homes in the orchard, $531,000 being received for 36 new homes. And the cash and various funds were operating funds, $581,000, asset replacement, $1,344,000, capital improvement, $1,325,000, and catastrophe, $99,000, leaving a total cash balance of $3,348,000.
Any questions on the treasurer's report? Move acceptance. Thank you. Seconded by Fran Diaz. All in favor? Treasurer's report is accepted. For the first time, welcome Cassie Turner to our board meeting. We have our first manager's report. You have copies of it attached to your agendas for those of you in the audience. Are there any questions of the manager regarding the report? Thank you all for presenting it then. We now have committee recommendations. The first is a recommendation from the Architectural Committee. That's item 9A. They are presenting to us for the first time a set of guidelines that they have developed for amending the protective restrictions to provide exclusive use common areas for homeowner associations that choose to go in that direction. At the present time, Meadow Green 2 is an association that has adopted the concept of exclusive use common areas. That is, 75% or more of the membership of that association has voted to expand beyond certain patio areas or entry areas a piece of the common area that will be dedicated to the exclusive use of that homeowner. And as I understand the guidelines, that homeowner becomes responsible for the maintenance of that exclusive use area. There is one other association that I have been told of, and that's the Oak Island, that is in the process of doing something similar, but the Architectural Committee has faced some challenges in trying to obtain an acceptable definition of that. The issue being the responsibility of the Architectural Association for the OVA to continue to control the kind of development that takes place. I don't believe that we have to adopt these, but I do want to make sure we brought it to everyone's attention. And if some of you think otherwise regarding accepting them or adopting them or raising some discussion about it, I'm glad to have that discussion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think I don't think we should be taking action on it today because it is a new item. Everybody should be able to read it and digest it and maybe do a little more research. But I believe it needs to be handled at a future meeting, put it on the agenda for some kind of action. Now, exactly what that action is, we have to look, and I see, if I'm not mistaken, something written by our legal, Malcolm Manuel, on his recommendations of what the guidelines ought to look like. Now, my first question to him would be, okay, is that an amendment to our bylaws or our other protective restrictions? Because if in fact they are, then is that something that's got to go through before the whole community for a vote? So that means we'd have to sit there and put that together and then mail it to all the individual members of Oakmont and allow them to vote on that, whether they want to do that. So then, like I said, I don't think we can really take any action on this point in time, but we really need to put on the agenda for action. And Mike, I'll leave it to your expertise and experience to determine what that action would be.
The only thing that I have noted is that the recommendation from the Architectural Committee says that this particular guideline statement that we see for the first time has been approved by Malcolm.
Yes, it has been approved. But like I said, one of the questions I would have of Mr. Manuel is, okay, hey, is that, are you saying because we have your approval, we don't have to go to the people of Oakmont?
Thank you.
John, excuse me.
Yes.
There's also a statement in there, Jim, that refers to the Architectural Committee's requirements and that this will not impact us.
I understand that. I understand what it says, and I read it. I'm just saying, though, for us to move on this, there has to be some better reflection and information given in order to make that decision. Because one of the decisions we may have to do is present it to all of Oakmont in a massive mailing for them to vote on it. Now, I'm not sure, but that's just a question I have, whether we have to do that or not. Also, I believe that one of the things in the guidelines was stated that it has to be determined by the homeowners association whether they, in fact, the individuals are going to take care of it, or is the homeowners association, as a group member, be responsible for the maintenance of all that and the insurance? Is that individual or the homeowner association? And also, I believe one point, in the guidelines, the homeowners association, if they want to do this, have also got to go back to the county and look at all the new lines now for the property, because it's now no longer, they have to get approval from the county to be able to do this. That's my understanding by what they're writing there. So it's just not a simple matter of them voting on it and say, let's do it. They have to sit there now, go to the county, and the county says, well, wait a minute, hold it. That was not what, they may say that was not under the idea that when the way Oakmont was built. It was meant to be built that to have common areas, and we want to make you adhere to that. Or they may not, but I still think they have to go to the county.
I think there are a number of questions that I agree with that you're raising, Jim, and I think there's one other. When I first saw these guidelines and went to the architectural committee to try and learn more of them, I also asked the architectural committee for a copy of the legal document that recorded this as far as the change in the association's protective restrictions. And then I went to talk to the president of the homeowners association. And it appears to me, subject to some checking, that after 2 years operating under these kinds of guidelines, what the residents voted on as the amount of area dedicated for private use has steadily been expanded without any further vote of the members of the association. So that in one instance that I was shown, that particular resident now has their entire yard considered part, the entire perimeter of their property considered exclusive use common area. And apparently no further vote by the membership has evolved. And so there are issues like this that we need to understand how they should be handled.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think that was one of the reasons why the necessity to go to the county, because you're going to have to sit there and change boundaries on deeds and stuff like that, it appears. And when you start doing that, then there's other questions they're going to have for you. But you're absolutely right.
And it gets into issues like their irrigation system and who pays for those kinds of things.
Well, yes, because some of the properties do back up against some of the creeks. So now you got a different agency at all getting involved with these decisions.
William?
Could I make a comment here? As chair of the Stone Creek Owners Association, I realize what the architectural committee is attempting to do, but I do believe the board should remain out of this as long as possible. It is a very, very particular legal area, and if you're getting involved in it, you're going to make a lot of work for yourself. I think it's up to the individual homeowners association to come up with their decision-making process, because it's very questionable. I realize where you are right now. It may be a little premature to get too deep into this because the issue is very complex, and I don't think it's something you want to get involved in as a board. Just a thought.
Thank you.
Could I comment on that, John? I disagree, Bill, because it's essential that the board is involved in this. The simple reason that the reasons for at least one of the organizations coming up with the idea of expanding the exclusive use to individual homeowners was that they also wanted to take over all architectural approval from the architectural committee. And that is a no-no as far as I'm concerned. And consequently, that is extensively a job of this board to review any such agreements.
You may misunderstand me. I agree with you, Herm. This is where the board is important. They've got a set of guidelines. But as far as the detail within the sub-association, it's up to them to deal with it, because it goes well beyond the the expertise of the board. First of all, I agree. The architectural committee has to have guidelines. Otherwise, they can't function. But do not get involved in the intricacies of the sub-association, because that's where it gets complex. There's a big discrepancy in the thought process of exclusive common area in a PUD or a condominium. That's all I'm trying to say. I believe the fact that the architectural committee is making an attempt to setting up guidelines is of utmost importance and should be doing so. Otherwise, there's no guidelines from the standpoint of the OBA functioning. So we're in agreement there. I just didn't know how involved you wanted to be in setting up sort of guidelines that go beyond the scope of the sub-association's governing body.
Thank you. So we have our study work to do in that connection. Thank you. We have a Finance Committee recommendation regarding the parking lot repairs and restriping.
A project was brought before the Finance Committee last week to repair and restripe the parking lot, and we certainly have more than adequate funds in the asset replacement reserve to cover this.
And the West Pool furniture.
Ditto.
Thank you.
Excuse me, John?
Yes.
There on the satellite photograph, there is an item K that is not discussed as to what you want to do with it.
Let's take it up when we get to that item for action on the agenda. Thank you. Excuse me, Art.
Could I make a comment? I just wonder where we're at with the Burger Plaza project. If we're going ahead and restriping the parking lot and then bringing heavy equipment in to remove all that concrete and whatever has to be brought in. Once again, more heavy equipment, and obviously the parking lot is where it will be staged.
The Burger Plaza building permit has not yet been issued. We are back for our third iteration from the city with questions from the building permit section of the Community Development Department that are being raised about various aspects of the design. The project manager for that, Ken Carr of Hoagland Land Services, is hoping that we could get that permit for the work this week. So we'll hope that there are no more red line items back from the city and that we've answered all their questions. With regard to the parking lot question, this is not a resurfacing of the parking lot that's been proposed. As you will see when we get to the item, Art, it has to do with simply blacking out the existing lines, which are faded, and putting in new striping lines. So it has nothing to do with the structure of the parking lot. But we'll get to that, and you can see the diagram located on the platform over on the side here. The long-range planning recommendation for pedestrian access and development restrictions on open space is item 9D. And the long-range planning committee had actually 3 specific requests that are on page 54 of your packet. First of all, they request that the board designate someone to represent Oakmont in the negotiations to maintain pedestrian access through Wild Oak to Channel Drive and to retain the existing footbridge access from the former city treatment plant off Channel Drive. It's my understanding that that leadership role has been assigned to the OCDC, but I'm open to any kind of comments or direction that other members of the board want to bring up.
I would just like to make a quick comment on the pedestrian access through Wild Oak to Channel Drive. I presume they mean from the Catholic Church along that path.
That's my understanding.
It's my understanding that that was, as far as pedestrian access of that area, that was never in question, and that's not involved in the suit between that organization and the city. They're talking strictly about bicycle access. That's the suit's involved with bicycle not pedestrian access. So I just don't think that's a pedestrian access. I don't believe is a problem on that particular entry.
Thank you for that clarification. Jim.
Also, Mr. Chairman, I think you're correct that the OCDC has been keeping their ears to the ground on that. Anytime something comes up like that adjoins our community, such as bike paths, lawsuits, and stuff like that, their chairman and their people have been pretty good about tackling that situation and reporting back to the board.
I think you're correct, and I think, as a matter of fact, they actually appointed Susan Millar, a member of the committee, to serve as chairman of a subgroup to begin at an appropriate time the exploration of work with the Bicycle Coalition.
That's correct.
And with other city representatives as well as Oakmont representatives to make sure we don't lose that access. Tony?
Yes, Tony Lakowitz, Bellhaven Place. I'm chairman of the Long Range Planning Committee. And the reason, John and members of the board, the reason we sent this letter to you is because, as you know, we had recently completed a long-range study of open space and recreation in Oakmont, a copy of which was distributed last month. I made a presentation on it last month. And for the benefit of the audience and members of the community, that will be the subject of an article in the next issue of the Oakmont News, and it will be posted in its entirety, all 32 pages of it, on the website probably within a week. And we hope everyone will look at it and give us feedback. But those two issues came up, and we really didn't have the information at the time we wrote the report that we do now. I had recently met with the OCDC. I talked to the members there, and they assured me that it was their responsibility to monitor what's going on with pedestrian access at the two locations, Channel Drive and at the city treatment plant. As you know, we recently lost the access to Annandale through Meadow Creek Court, and it was a concern of our committee that we didn't want to wake up one day and find that another access from Oakmont to Annandale had been lost. The property behind the city treatment plant has a footbridge. It's very important for people who want to walk from our community to the state park, have a safe access. But I think right now what you're saying is OCDC's got it. Susan Millar is the point person on OCDC, and we will, I would expect that any developments that came out of there would be brought to our attention for appropriate action so that we don't lose another access to the state park.
Thank you. The, oh, excuse me, Susan behind you.
Oh. I think maybe this might be an appropriate time to report on this situation. I haven't done anything about it for quite a while. There are at least 5 entities that are involved in that pathway to cross that bridge. And one of them is the Benson Oak Creek storage people. And then there's Caltrans, Sonoma County, City of Santa Rosa, and there may be one other I'm not thinking about. The problem we're going to have is with City of Santa Rosa, if they decide to take the bridge down, I'm not sure we're going to have much warning about that. They could decide to do it overnight, I suppose. So that right now, the only thing I know that is in the works is that Brad Benson wishes to build a little home on his property to have a manager there to kind of keep an eye on the bridge. He's had some problems with people coming through Channel Drive, cutting his fence, with fence cutters and finding an appropriate vehicle to sleep in. So he is going through the process. He has gotten approval from our architectural committee, and he is working with the city of Santa Rosa, and he probably will, in the spring, build a, I don't want to say a trailer, but a cottage, yeah, and for a manager to be there overnight. That is as far as the progress I know about. But thanks for all your work, Tony.
I feel safer and I can sleep well tonight.
Well, I certainly think the community wants to be sure that nothing happens in the middle of the night as far as the city's unilateral action is concerned. So if there's something that we need or should be able to do to keep the dark of night from removing our access to that facility, we ought to be getting about it.
Mr. President, I think the second request there regarding the development restrictions on the property that we own is a valuable thing that needs to be done by somebody. I don't know.
I agree with you, Herm, and I don't believe that our present OBA attorney is the person with the skill set, but I do believe that an appropriate individual with real estate planning and zoning expertise, be they attorney or some other profession, could be helpful.
How about Ken Blackman?
Could be. I guess without objection from other members of the board, I would ask the manager to bring us a proposal to hire someone to do this particular kind of research. We've got 25 acres out there that some people think is developable and some people think is open space, and some people think whether it's developable or open space, we don't want anything built there, and so forth. So we need some clarification as to finding the right person and what it's going to cost us to understand what this vacant land really is.
Would you be agreeable to this? I ran this past my husband, who was an ex-commercial developer and real estate broker, and he said he'd be willing to go down to the city with Tony to do some research in this area. I'm not saying that he'd give you a definitive report, but the commercial or the developed lands are specific. Mary Patricia has given me a list of their assessment parcel numbers, and that's all you need to start to go down to the city and just look and see what the description is.
So David is ready to become an Oakmont volunteer?
Yes.
Sounds good to me.
It's a start.
Thank you.
It's just a start.
But
thank you, Kathy.
Let's also begin to look for some official support. Sure. Thank you. There is one other item that was in his notes, but is not in this specific letter, that I would like to get a sense of the board about, and that's the issue of dismantling all the infuriated developments on the game field course that some people call the par course, or the wooden structures, railings and platforms and so forth along the sides of the path from Stonebridge Road to Meadow Creek Lane, or Meadow Ridge Lane. Thank you.
John, excuse me. I have a comment in regard to that park course. I live directly above it, and for the past 20 years, I have seldom, if ever, seen anyone use any of those park course features.
I think that's the conclusion that we read in the Long Range Planning Committee's analysis of the situation. I'm just looking for some counsel from the rest of the board as to how we go about approving dismantling.
I thought that we had made a decision previously to get rid of that, but evidently never had done so formally.
It's an activity, I'm told by the maintenance manager, that he and his staff would be able to take care of over time. And if there's a consensus on the part of the board that that's the direction to go, I'm happy with that.
Well, we really have three choices. Fix it up, leave it the way it is, or tear it out. It's not being used, it's terribly deteriorated, so that leaving the way it is not an option. I can't see spending money on fixing something up that's not used, which leaves the third choice, which is obvious, is to tear the mess down. And that would be my recommendation.
Jim, your thoughts?
No, I'm just, I kind of agree with what Mr. Felton said, except the fact, remember, your primary purpose is to provide recreation, exercise facilities to the Oakmont. And whether you're going to get, you're having this discussion now, and then are you going to get any blowback from your community?
I think we might be well advised, in the interest of transparency, to ask the administration to put an article in the next issue of the Oakmont News indicating to them that the board is inclined to move in the direction of removing this deteriorated furniture. And if that's objectionable, would they please let us know about it so that we could evaluate that before we take action?
Just as a clarification, long-range planning recommended that the apparatus be removed, not the walking path.
Oh, absolutely.
That's you. It's very popular.
Devlin?
Yeah, one aspect, of course, that needs to be addressed is the walking path and the railing. So that needs to be restored and rebuilt and secured. I understand that it's in poor condition. So I think maintenance can look at that and give us their opinion as to what would be involved in order to restore that aspect.
Just the railing part.
Well, the other thing is to decide whether we actually need a railing there.
Well, I'd comment on that. Without the railing, there's a chance of stumbling and rolling down the hill. And I don't think everyone would like to have to clean them up out of a backyard when they're piled up there.
Well, I can address that a little bit. I walk that a lot, and that railing is more decorative than physical reality, and it's failing, and I don't think it really serves the protective function. And I think it's mostly, for the appearance of it all. And I don't think it is perpetuated unless it's either turned into a real protective railing or just abandoned.
Let me suggest that we separate these two issues. One, the article in the Oakmont News to advise the community that we're planning to proceed with dismantling of the exercise station furniture that's deteriorated. And we would like to know if that causes any objections on the part of residents so that we can evaluate that. Secondly, we'll ask the manager to evaluate the requirements for a railing on any section of this path.
I would suggest that we do not call it furniture, we call it structure. Furniture implies folding chairs and tables, which would be very confusing.
Proposing to dismantle structure, thank you. Tony, does that take care of the items that were on your?
Yes, thank you.
Then we go to new business items. The first is the appointment of a nominating committee for the election of directors in 2014. You have in your packet on page 55 my recommendation for a nominations committee to be chaired by Kathleen Conley, and the membership would involve Virginia Katz, Tony Lakowitz, Steve LaRucca, and Teresa Woodrum. And I might note that in addition to nominations by the committee pursuant to our bylaws, nominations may be made by petition, by self-nomination, by nomination from the floor, and by write-in campaign. Do I have a motion to appoint the ad hoc nominations committee as outlined in page 55 of your packet?
Before we go to that, I had given you one other name that was not listed here. Was there a reason for that?
We're limited to 5 members as far as the committee.
Thank you, sir.
So moved.
Moved by Jim, seconded by Herm Herman. Discussion?
Are you, I presume they're going to be given this notes for
they were given that as part of my arm twisting. And
I note that the majority of this committee is a little bit younger than at least my age, and I hope that they concentrate on a younger element of the community.
you and I had the same goals.
Call the question.
All in favor? Motion passed. The item 10B is for new furniture at the West Pool. This involves 12 chairs, 12 chaise lounges, and one 24-inch diameter steel plate base to support an umbrella. The furniture is Tropitone, the same design and supplier as was used to resupply the central pool in 2012. The cost for this is $7,659. We have a motion to approve this action.
So moved.
Moved by Jim Kaiser, seconded by Evelyn George. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to make a comment if I will.
Please.
I'm very happy to say that we've moved in on this, and it'll be the first part of our restoration of the West. Any of you who have ventured up to the West Pool area knows that this is a sorely needed item, and we'll be happy to see it replaced. We are keeping, by the way, just as a point of decor, the same color as we have at the Central, so that if we do need to interchange with any of our facilities, it would be a great deal easier to do. We still have, as our chairman said, the Tropitone furniture, highly serviceable and provided as we have at the Central. Hope that you will approve of what we're beginning to do, and that this is the first step forward for the West.
All in favor? Motion passes. Next, we have a charter and an appointment of an ad hoc employee abuse committee. This is the proposal that Hugh Helm put together, the recruiting work that he did. And so you have a description on page 59 of the resolution to be adopted. It reads, for those in the audience, whereas there have been instances reported of residents of OVA verbally abusing OVA staff, and whereas OVA has a responsibility to provide OVA staff a safe workplace, therefore the OVA Board of Directors creates an ad hoc committee on verbal abuse of OVA staff by residents with the following charter. The ad hoc committee on verbal abuse of OVA staff by residents shall develop a policy for consideration by the OVA Board of Directors to address the problem of verbal abuse of staff by residents and present it to the board on or before its February 2014 meeting. The proposed committee membership is Hugh Helm Chair, Cassie Turner, Brian Adams, and Joe Henderson. The committee may have additional members as recommended by the committee, subject to approval of the president. Do I have a motion to appoint this committee and adopt this resolution? Moved by John Felton, seconded by Evelyn George. Discussion.
Question. I just don't happen to know two of the people on there. What is their background and?
Which two are you talking about?
I know you and I know Cassie Turner. So.
Brian Adams has an HR background and was involved, I think, in the search committee, right, for Cassie, and he's a Rotary member and fairly active in the community. Joe Henderson is a guy I brought in because he's lived here a couple of years but hasn't been involved in much and should be. He's an attorney. He's a labor relations arbitrator, travels a lot, and practiced law, was an assistant city manager here many years ago in the city of Santa Rosa, was dean of Empire Law School for 10 years. He knows what he's doing. Okay.
Further discussion? All in favor? Oh, excuse me.
One other quick question. Address the problem of verbal abuse. Is there any other kind of abuse that should be considered? I mean, is there any physical or we're not
haven't
concerned
had
with
any.
that?
I just don't know of any reported incidents, though.
Okay.
I think that there's a sense of capacity for intimidation by use of physicality, but I don't think it's part of the verbal process more than physical.
I guess I'd only elaborate a little bit on that, and we did have one case in the past year that involved, if not physically striking an employee, at least enough of a physical presence that it was very threatening. And the simple answer there was to call in the police and treat it through our attorney as a court case. So that was. The next item D under 10 is appointing the ad hoc pickleball court site design and construction committee. The charter that I have recommended on page 61 says that the committee will clearly define the scope for Oakmont's long-term development of pickleball courts, identify appropriate site or sites, and related ready-to-play construction and landscaping costs. Hold community input workshops to identify resident support of the site choice or choices, along with funding priority and source. Develop an implementation plan and schedule that will permit the return of the East Recreation Center Tennis Court number 4 for full-time tennis play on or before May 1 of 2015. That date reflects the 18 months that was in our resolution a month ago to accomplish this transition. The membership proposed for the committee is Cassie Turner, chairman, Anita Easlin, Noel Lyons, and Jane York, who represent interests particularly of the pickleball activities. Michael Goff, who's the overseer from the tennis court, Max Hinchman, who is representing the Petanque interest, and I have asked the Finance Committee to appoint a liaison to be sure that they stay on the right track so far as their financing activities are concerned. And at their meeting last week, Chuck Chenal appointed John Green to be the Finance Committee liaison to this committee. So do I have a motion to adopt this charter and appoint this membership for the ad hoc committee for pickleball courts? Moved by Herman Hess, seconded by Herm Herman. Discussion among the board members? For your information, I particularly included in the language of this proposed charter points on identifying the source of funds, because as you will recall, pickleball is new on the arena. It was not in our goal-setting selections for this particular year. It's not funded. It was a list of possible goals, but it was not prioritized as the top goal. And secondly, there is no money set aside for it in any of our funds. And so the question becomes, do we want to take it from a special assessment? Do we want to take it from capital improvement funds? Or do we want to find some other course of action? So that's a challenge for them to address.
Well, yes, Mr. Chairman, but when you've appointed a liaison from the Finance Committee, I would assume that would be one of their functions as this committee is going down the road, sit there and say, okay, this is where we're going to come with the funds, this is where we're going to find the funds, or this is what we're going to do. So that should be part of the recommendation, and I would expect the Finance Committee to do that.
I would hope so. I just was trying to provide you some background as to why I had put the recommendation together the way I have. Is there other discussion? Wait, I don't even have a motion yet. I do have a motion. Thank you. No other discussion? Call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Committee is appointed. Item 10E is the Central Burger parking lot. It has really two components to it. The address by the Finance Committee was approval of up to $22,000 to do both of these. The most significant portion to do now is to prevent potholes from development. And so the diagram that you have represents Stripe and Seal's investigation into significant small sections that have alligatoring taking place, to the extent that if we don't move promptly to correct that, we will end up with potholes in those locations and face a much more difficult time resurfacing this parking lot at some future date after whatever construction work we do on the plaza or elsewhere might be accomplished. And that represents $18,431 of the proposed expense. The second half is to take a step forward to provide additional parking spaces in the parking lot, and that would be done in two phases in order to not close the parking lot entirely at the time the work is done. And so do half one time and half the next. So that's the reason for the additional $650 in the process, so that the total cost for the restriping, which involves blacking out the existing striping, putting in ADA symbols on the existing 4 ADA parking places, putting in 2 8-foot wide ADA hash band unloading areas, adding 15 miscellaneous hashed areas to indicate that they're not parking spaces, to do the new 60-degree angled stall lines, and to add 4 parallel parking stalls next to the green grassy area at the far end of the parking lot, adjacent to the lawn bowling green. Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation to do this burger parking lot work? We'll get to the discussion after we have a motion. Do we have a motion to do this parking lot work? Herm Hess makes a motion to do the parking lot work. Do we have a second? John Feldman seconds. Now do we have discussion now?
Mr. Chairman, I do have some concerns, because there were plans to incorporate lighting and irrigation as tied to the Burger Center, and I don't know whether we have an overlap or not in regards to doing this, and whether any of this resurfacing would be torn up in order to pursue some of the aspects of the phase 1 of the burger, and then we have phase 2, and it is related to this end of the parking lot, where they would be doing trenching and putting in some irrigation lines and light fixtures. And, you know, I'm wondering about the urgency of this. I mean, I realize I understand all of your reasoning, but these are aspects of the plans that perhaps should be connected to what is on the table, or at least was in the plans, and going forward, whether it's appropriate or not.
All I can share with you, Evelyn, in connection with those, is that there is nothing in the Burger Plaza construction project that involves any kind of trenching in the parking lot. It involves putting a ramp in through a curb cut from the edge of the parking lot up into the new plaza, but there is no intrusion into the parking lot or any work associated with this plaza redoing. And I'm not aware of any plans that exist, although there's been off and on conversation about new lighting in the Berkeley parking lot. I'm not aware of any engineering plans or design work that's been done to bring that kind of a project up for consideration. So this is just a recommendation from our maintenance manager that says we need to repair these alligator areas in order to avoid having them deteriorate to the point that it would make it more costly to do a repaving at some future time. This proposal doesn't involve doing any resurfacing of the parking lot in general. It simply involves painting new stripes after the alligatoring work is done. Is that helpful in answer?
Well, it is. I just don't know whether we need to be a little conservative at this point or look into the plans. I guess somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm remembering that Lori Cagwin had plans for lighting that she was recommending, and I might even look to someone who's here in landscaping, because that was going through that committee as well as Facility Improvement Committee. So both of those committees were involved with these, let's say, tentative plans. So I'm putting it to you because if you know more than I do, and if you feel that this is something that we need to do as a mainstay to prevent any further deterioration, and that it would not be a wasted amount of money, should we go forward with other programs and other plans, I should say, for redoing any lighting or resurfacing?
Well, I think we see the procrastination causes us problems, and I have substantial confidence in the fact that the maintenance manager would come forward with the recommended upkeep of the existing parking lot. I can't take it on any further than what I've told you. I'm not an expert in it. Yes?
Yes, John. I have a question still on this item K. If you look on page 65, it is not mentioned, but if you go over to the satellite photograph, it is shown and it is described as an area that's 14 feet by 68 feet. And I wonder what's involved there.
Well, item K in my diagram is outlined as an area to be where the alligatoring is to be repaired.
Yes.
And it's decided it's a 14 by 68 foot.
Right, but it is not described over in this paper.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It just appears that the estimate, the estimate and the drawing don't jive.
I got you.
I'm assuming that I'm sorry, Mr. Baum, go ahead. I'm assuming that this Stripe and Seal company, they're the one that provided the verbiage and the picture?
Yep.
All right. So they should take nothing more than them to sit there, they've already got it on picture, you've got the data,
Yep.
they just need to shore it up.
Yeah, I think so.
Is the material to be used to overcoat the alligator area the same as was chosen for the west? That was that upgraded product?
No, it is not. It is not an overlaying of any sort. It is really just a patching after they cut out the alligator and put it back together. This is not a resurfacing of the parking. It's repairing those areas to the point of preventing potholes.
A couple of questions or comments. I'm still unsure what the urgency is to do this restriping, but it's a comparatively such a minor cost to do it that if it has to be redone later, it can be redone later. The other question or the comment I have has to do with the additional 1, 2, 3, 4, it looks like 4 parking spaces at the, I guess it'd be the north end of the parking lot, the green area there. How were these decided on? I think that's a comparatively narrow turn for people driving down the main drive path in the parking lot, making a left turn there. It just seems to be pretty tight, particularly considering there's a drop-in mailbox right there that's going to have, unless we're planning to remove that, I don't know.
I don't know of any plans to change the mailbox, and I do know that it would narrow that area. I view this proposed restriping as a way of our knowing whether or not this Burger parking lot is going to be able to support the kind of additional parking that will be necessary if we decide to do any kind of expansion of the current CAC in order to enlarge the fitness center or to provide office space or anything. It will also become an issue if we try to build pickleball courts in this vicinity. The city has just made it clear to us that we got our chance when we built the CAC to get away with leaving it at 151 spaces. I don't know the community will be happy with 60-degree angle parking spaces. I haven't heard any complaints about 90-degree angle parking spaces at the east. And my observation is that it's not much different, and we know the measurements of the aisles to know that we more than adequately provide for what the city requires in terms of a 60-degree angle parking space.
I don't disagree with this 60 degrees. I'm just looking at people turning that corner at the end of the parking lot and plowing into somebody parked there. Oh.
I think that's a potential. I would agree with you. And what we may learn is that one or more of those proposed locations, even though they're legal in terms of the width of the parking space, is something we don't want to do in the long term. And therefore, when we come to resurfacing that parking lot, we would know that that would be something we wouldn't have done. Carol, you've been patient. Do you have a comment?
Carol Cotton, Pine Valley Drive. You're saying that lighting is not going to, or the lighting is not going to be, electrical is not going to be a problem with restriping, but when you get into the plaza project, I hope you're going to be considering additional lighting out here at nighttime when large groups of people leave the Burger. It's not properly lit from the main doors to the parking lot, especially for people with walkers. There's some real dark spaces there. And I talked to the previous manager before about this, and she said, oh, don't worry, our plans are to have much better lighting out here. So whenever you get to that point, I hope you will consider the fact that it needs to be addressed.
Well, my understanding from comments that the team that worked on the plaza design, Eleanor Brodnansky, who we heard from earlier, and Bob Adams, that lighting is a very essential element of the design component for all of the activity to go on here at the Burger Plaza. Any other discussion? Yes, Noel?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up because there was some talk about, history and where the lighting come from. This lot was originally supposed to be paid in Ted Bronson's last year. And because of the manager changeover, that got delayed. It was supposed to be done 3 years ago. And then we got concerned about, I think, ADA access, and so it was 2 years ago. And then we got involved with the Central Plaza project. And so now we're patching the lot that should have been repaved several years ago. And we're not going to repave it because of a possible construction project that may or may not happen. We could keep going like this forever and not taking care of what we've got because we're thinking, well, but let's wait till we do this one more thing. And you can't just keep doing that. I'm with you. I don't know whether 60 degrees is going to work or not. I would leave it alone, but I understand that, the desire for more parking too. We only will find out, but we really ought to be putting that on new pavement. The other issue is that in all those discussions, and while we were on the board, they said, when we pave, that's when we'll put in new lighting. There was no lighting project. They said even if we don't have a lighting design, because we were supposed to pave 3 years ago, we'd put the chases in out to the islands so that when lighting got designed, it could be done. And that seems to have been forgotten. Jim's nodding his head.
Well, no, and I agree with what you're saying, because whenever we went to prior to resurfacing, or whenever we resurface the parking lot, we said that's when we do our trenching out in the parking lot to the islands for the lighting, because that has been before this board on a couple times, and that was one of the things that we did vote on, was to approve putting in lighting, but only whenever we do the resurfacing of the parking lot, excuse me.
Well, we have a recommendation from our maintenance manager, a very competent gentleman, that we take care of this. We're not talking, we keep talking about repaving, we're patching areas that need it. Rain's coming, we know what happens when the pavement's already cracked and the water gets in there. It's just going to be a matter of time before it falls apart completely and costs us more. At this point, I am in favor of moving on and getting this project finished to protect our investment we have at the present time. And I call the question.
All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is finally the adoption by the board of the policy for committee appointments and operations. I haven't had any input from others about the criticism of the final published edition. So I guess I'm looking for a motion.
I'm so moved to
Thank
approve
you,
it.
Jim. Second? Herman seconds it. Do we have any discussion? Yes. Here, you got it. Yep. Just hold it like a snooper.
My concern is item number 4 under the general provisions, which reads, appointees may be members of the OVA. I would assume they must be members of the OVA. Am I missing something here?
Yes, you're missing the fact that non-member residents may be appointed to the committee.
If that's the case, I think it's important that we take up the question of voting, because I feel definitely on our committee recommendations, only residents should not be able to make major financial decisions in their vote. It should be, in that case, that the voting must be done by members of the OVA.
Well, I think we face a problem in that regard, Fran, because we benefited, number one, from non-member residents being members of our committee. Non-member residents pay dues just like members pay. So they have, at least as long as they're residents here, the same kind of commitment as I understand.
Mr. Chairman, I have to disagree with that statement.
Okay.
The renters are not responsible for payment of the dues. That always and has always been the responsibility of the owner. Now, they may pass that money on, the cost on to the renter.
That's all I was referring to.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but once again, to Ms. Diaz's statement, yeah, the members are the only one that's spending the money and authorizing it.
My concern, Mr. Chairman, is that, again, without any ownership of property, they should not be making, non-residents should not be making decisions on spending the money of the OVA for property belonging to OVA.
May I
Yeah, please help me.
May I comment? In the first place, committee members do not make decisions on spending money. That decision is right here. We're the only ones that make decisions on spending money. All they do is recommend one course of action or another. So I see nothing wrong with having some interested person putting their input in on that. It makes no difference. We're the final decision making on spending money. It's not that committee.
I might add that if you did such a thing and said only members of the association could serve on committees, we would probably lose from a quarter to a third of the number of members, active members on our committees at this time. There have always been numerous people who are not members of the association by law, but who live here. For instance, when I moved here, we put our home in my wife's name. I was not a member. I finally, in order to get around that fact, to run for the board a few years ago, we redid that, and I'm now a 1% owner of our home, so that I could be a member of the association. But we have numerous people here who are very active on our committees and have been for years and will continue to be in the future that are not legally members of the OVA. I think you would be doing a great disservice to the community to try to change that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not suggesting that that non-members my feeling was that non-owners should be on our committees. I agree with you, Wally, completely with that. I just feel that on voting, that the non-members of the OVA not cast their vote.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this? Call for the question then. Oh, pardon me, I didn't look the right way.
Well, it's just an editorial, very, very minor thing to correct. On item number 3, where it says committees shall be made up of no fewer than 3 persons, the actual membership of each committee will be reflected in its charter. It's just a type, it's an editorial.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
John?
John, excuse me, on page 69,
yeah,
it makes mention of association vice president. And who is that?
Glad I got that out of the way.
John, do you have a comment?
Yes, item 8, we discussed this somewhat when we put this together. I need a re-clarification. All standing committees are advisory to the board. They shall annually submit their charter to the board for review, modification, and approval. I'm a little bit confused here in that it is the board that defines what the function of the committee is and why and what their job is. Wouldn't it then also make sense that the board would define what the charter would be, keeping in line with what they're asking the committee to do, rather than turn it over to the committee to come up with a charter that they think matches what we want?
It's a matter of who wants to do the work or who we ask to do the work of developing the charter. I just soon.
Well, hold it. I think, I'm sorry, Herm, but the statement is, it says they shall annually submit their charter to the board for the board to review or to modify and approve. The committee's not doing anything. The board would modify it if they so desired. It's up to the board. So that goes to your point.
I think we're in the position of these standing committees particularly having established charters. And so the board doesn't find itself in the position of simply drawing up a new charter to establish the committee. You'll notice in the ad hoc committees that we are appointed that includes not only the membership but the charter that the board has written.
then what happens if the board decides that we need a new committee? It is not an ad hoc committee, a new standing committee.
We would have to write the charter.
Then we would write the charter, and that's where it's not clear here. I'm just saying, are we precluding that by what we've written? And if
Don't
that's
think
not
so,
the
Rick.
case, I don't want to make a big
I
deal
don't
out of it.
think so, Ruth.
I had mentioned this before, and I'm kind of holding to my point, that under item 14B, as a point of clarification, what problem would it be to include all of those committees by name, rather than just referring to them as standing committees? At least we know exactly which committees are being referred to. They've been eliminated here, and I didn't understand why. I think it would behoove us to cite those committees that are involved. I had questions for a long time about really which are standing committees. And this helps, it makes it clearer and more definitive.
I think, if I may, Mr. Chairman, we post a constant thing on our current roster of standing committees, okay? And you're aware of that, okay? And if we make changes or like that, then this is just another time on document. If you start listing all these committees that may or may not change, then that means you got to remember to go back and change these documents. And when you do that, when you don't do that, now you've got out-of-date documents. And by doing it this way, a little more generic, but still covers the standing committee. And we do have a roster that's always posted with the up-to-date list of standing committees.
Thank you. Just one question, Mr. Kaiser. Do our committee, I thought these standing committees historically were exactly what we have had in place for many years and will be the same going forward. Will there be changes? I mean, do you anticipate it?
Yes, well, we've changed the name of several over the last several years. We've dropped a couple. We may improve, may make some more in the future. We just don't know.
Okay, thank you for your explanation.
Excuse me.
Verbal abuse committee decision might result in a new standing committee, for example.
I have a comment. We're talking about the committee's report. And isn't that normally handled in our consent calendar? By item 6B? And so if they change the names of them, we could still cover and include them in the agenda.
Absolutely, no problem. Yeah, this was just a convenience item that we restricted these. It was simply put out of there so that we could add or subtract committees without going through the 90-day publication process that a policy requires.
Call the question, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor of finally adopting this policy for committee appointments and operations? As amended, to add reflected ED to the...
And could we have, as soon as possible, a clean new copy distributed to us? Thank you, guys.
But that then raises the question, with that approval, would you like me to go ahead and appoint liaisons to our committees?
I think it's about time.
However, it's not on the agenda.
I have to have it on the agenda in order to make appointments?
Well, I think it's a board business item that you've got here, and you're doing it under new business.
I'll put it on the next one, thank you. But I'd like the following considerations. If you don't want to do it, let me know, because I've come up with a list for information purposes.
Well, yeah, can we hear your list?
That's what I was going to say. Architectural Committee, Herm Herman. Long Range Planning, Herman Hess. OCDC, Fran Diaz. Oakmont Emergency Preparedness, John Felton. Loma, Jim Kaiser. Communications, Evelyn George. And Finance, our treasurer.
I think the policy you just approved refers to liaisons as appointed by the board. I don't think it takes appointed by the president. I don't think it takes a board action. I think we can appoint those. That's, I think, what you just approved.
I'm just going to defer to my cohorts here on the panel. Thank you. Don't want to debate language anymore this afternoon. We'll bring it up next time.
In line with that, are we going to reconstitute at some, where is the FIC and the LIC?
I presented to you at the workshop.
Yeah.
A proposed outline. I've had no comments from any of you regarding that possible charter, and so I haven't proceeded beyond there for any suggestions as far as chairmanship or further action. So I'm looking for some feedback from you.
Okay, and if you don't get any feedback, when's it going to be on the agenda?
When would you like to have it on?
As soon as possible.
I'll see what kind of feedback I get, to be honest. I would suspect that it will not be on the December agenda because of other activities. But get it up there. The next item we have is a request to have the manager talk to us about the central pool remaining open in light of circumstances at the east pool. Cassie, you have comments for us, please?
In general, there were some people who came into the office and requested that the central pool stay open all year round because of a general increase in the people using in the pool, but specifically now people from the east are coming and using the central pool because of the bathroom and changing situation. And also people from the West Rec Center were coming because of the heating situation at their pool. But in general, these people did request that because of those people coming from the East and West Rec Center, and because there are more people just in general using the pools now, and because this is an association that has its primary focus is to keep the recreational facilities in good working order and for everyone, they've requested that the central pool remain open all year.
Normally, the central pool would close at Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Board members have any reaction? Comment?
I think that this is a reasonable request to make, and I don't think we need to establish it as an indefinite policy, but certainly for now it seems appropriate with all the factors playing into what we have at the west and with the construction that's going on now at the east. Indeed, it would accommodate a lot of the needs. So let's just say on a temporary basis, as long as there are construction circumstances at both the east and the west, that we will accommodate our residents with the use of the central pool.
Kind of agree with Ms. George that, as long as we got the construction going on both sides, creating, places for people having to go, then we should keep it open, and the central open until all construction's done, and then maybe a little time after that, just to evaluate the usage and see if it really needs to stay open or not.
Could we ask the manager to come up with costs, if possible, for keeping the, because one request is to keep it open all year. I agree strongly we should keep it open as long as but I think to look at the long range cost of keeping it open all year, we need some idea of what the cost would be, additional cost would be for that. I don't know how easy that's to be done, but if we could do that.
I looked at the historic numbers on electricity, and it appears that the electrical charges go up about $3,000 a month during the summer. And certainly if we're heating the pool in the wintertime, I don't know what it'll go up, but more than that. And there's a second thing to consider. In the summer when the central pool's open, we have part-time temporary lifeguards that come in, and we pay them about $1,300 a month. So we need to consider if we're going to have lifeguards at the central pool on a more extended period or not. And if we do, then that's another almost $6,000 a month.
I think we also have to define, if we keep it open, whether there'd be a change in hours would be appropriate with the change of the season, because that would affect the numbers too. I think we have to define that in order for Cassie to go ahead with her calculation.
And also, I think with the use of the I guess, monitors, the pool monitors, I don't want to use the word lifeguard, but the pool monitors, those are there primarily during the summer for whenever we have kids available, if I'm not mistaken. And Thanksgiving, that's whenever, or at the end of summer, we no longer allow kids into the central pool, so therefore we don't have the pool monitor.
Without objection, in order not to approach this as a policy or a long-term decision, I understand that what you're saying is that we'll keep the pool open until the deck is clear as far as additional heaters at the west are concerned and repairs at the east are concerned. Is that acceptable as far as you're concerned?
You would have to ask the people who came in, but that's at least a baseline for them, for request, yes.
Thank you. Yes, Bridget.
Bridget Molinari. I just want to mention that I did go to the Finance Committee, and Mr. Kaiser, you said that we have no children during the winter months. I agree, we don't. But at that Finance Committee, there was immediately 2 members told me that we discriminating if we don't have kids all the time there.
Well, that's, Ms. Molinari, I have to disagree with you simply because this is a plus 55 community.
I understand
We don't
that.
have to entertain children at all if we don't want to. We do it simply by the kindness of everybody's heart to help people that've got grandchildren here. That's why we accommodate that, and we accommodate it during the summer whenever kids are on vacation, visiting their grandparents.
I agree with you 100%. I just want to let you know that it was immediately, I was told that we're discriminating if we don't do that.
And that's good, and I immediately responded to it. Thank you.
Item 10H, the secretary advised me was unnecessary for me to put on the agenda. He pointed out that our bylaws say that any ad hoc committee shall automatically be discharged upon completion of its function. And so we'll skip that particular item and I'll learn that lesson. Item I, regarding a painting class to be led by residents.
Before you go on, excuse me, to go back, item G on the pools. Yes, what was your decision, first of all? You keep it open through the installation of the heaters at the west and the repair.
Construction at the east.
Okay.
And I would think that when that is done, that you would review it again. I
Right.
don't think that you would just suddenly close it
I'm
without
a
any
long-
notice.
I'm a long-time swimmer there, and I see just a couple other swimmers here too. And we can work with Kathy with all our recommendations if you'd like.
Thank you.
There's a second and third set of recommendations that they have.
And is that something you want to pursue today?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, but along with this is in discussion mode now, obviously. I'm not taking any action on it, but do we need to consider the hour that has been requested, that it be opened at 7 in the morning for the earlier users?
I think that's a question I already raised, and Cassie has that in her notes.
Right. They don't need it open any earlier if you're going to keep it open until further notice.
At 7 o'clock, right? At 7 o'clock.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you're saying. You didn't have a microphone. You.
Well, it seems to be a discussion of whether or not to remain open in the earlier hour that was agreed to at 7 o'clock. And I'm just asking the question is that, are you approving that those hours continue so it opens at 7 o'clock? And it really does need to, because we have quite a few people, from the East Rack, and there's also some of the water aerobic people that come in fairly early in the morning, and it does get quite crowded. I know I go down there myself quite a lot. So I certainly recommend that we continue the hours at 7 to whatever the closing hours are until such time as you feel that it's not appropriate anymore because of the construction going on that will be completed in the other area.
subject to check. I believe what we did was say that we would keep the pool operating as it is at the Central until the other activities are completed.
Thank you.
And then we would review it in time for people to get in their 50 cents worth about what changes take place after that. Thank you. The next item on the agenda has, as I was saying, has to do with a request by a resident artist, Richard McDaniel, to offer a painting class at which at least 51% of the residents, of the participants in the painting class would be residents. When this came to my attention, rather than putting it on the consent calendar, I moved it to this location so that we could have a fuller discussion. Richard is a very talented artist. He's the one that painted the painting that graces the wall in the lobby of the CAC. And he has taught many classes here and certainly has broad support, as I have been told, by the Art Association. A problem developed, however, with his classes. Not enough Oakmont residents participated in those classes for him to consider it as a worthwhile adventure, because they pay a fee in order to participate in his classes. And there were outside people that he knew of that would be interested in taking his classes. And they got let in by the back door through the kiln room. And so we had a situation where, in essence, the OVA was faced with the public being invited to use our facilities. And that's something we can't tolerate, because not necessarily because of the insurance implications, which are quite modest, but because of the potential for ADA demand to improve facilities. And a resident interested in supporting Richard's effort to offer more classes wrote to me about what did they need to do to make it possible for him to offer classes. And I made the effort to read through both our guest policy, which makes it clear that a group or a club or an OVA-sponsored class can have non-residents participate as long as they're guests of a resident, as long as they are hosted by a resident. And likewise, our matrix indicates that as long as there's one more than half of the class that are Oakmont residents, that meets the requirements as well. And so this particular proposal by Mr. McDaniel to head a class is contingent on his having support from the Art Association and from others who are interested in his work in assuring our association that the standards are being met. And I don't know how to guarantee that as far as our action is concerned. It's a situation, if we approve this, that we're going to have some kind of monitoring to periodically check. But I put it on our agenda for this discussion because the same kind of concept applies to lifelong learning. It applies to the concert series and all of our other activities. And I thought this one little piece was a way for us to discuss what we think is the right direction to go. So I'm interested in your input and how we get to this. Go ahead.
Well, if you look at this on the whole, it's hard to say that it's not good to have a well-known artist come in and to participate with what we do here in Oakmont. And notwithstanding the policy that our president just discussed as far as public access to Oakmont, it's our number one responsibility to assure that we stay within our legal limits And and safety and those kinds of things are number one. And number two after that is, of course, supplying recreational facilities. I think it's an extremely bad precedent to set, saying that, well, this is a good cause, then we ought to do it. And I think I run into the situation when I went down to get permit to the city for work at the east, for example. One of the first questions that comes up, and it always comes up, is when it comes to ADA, is this going to be is this area or use going to be accessible for public use, or is it for the Oakmont residents? And when you cross that line, big stuff starts coming down on you. And we would be legally responsible to go ahead and we'd be wide open for not meeting ADA requirements if we make exceptions here. And where I think it's a great idea, I think that it's a very poor precedent to start, and I'm adamantly opposed to doing this.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, just let me respond for a moment. This applicant is not proposing to break the rules. The applicant is proposing to follow exactly the kind of rules that we're talking about. 51% and invited guests. So,
But Mr. President, compliance with those rules does not mean there will still not trigger an ADA requirement.
And not only that, Mr. President, he doesn't say guests. It says remaining 49 being non-resident class members, right? Because, I mean, if you look at it, and I have to agree with Mr. Felton, with everything Mr. Felton just said, the fact is, okay, yes, if the whole point about the 51 and 49 was, if I'm sitting here and I want to take my wife or my brother's visiting, we want to do something, it's a club event, whether it be, then I can take them and I host them. Or if I had a friend from out of town to do that. But it was not to sit there and open it up to all the other people within Sonoma County or wherever to sit there and say, oh, okay, when you get there, just have Jim Kaiser sign his name as hosting you. That's direct violation of what it was we're trying to achieve and anybody trying to enforce the rules.
When we came up with that policy that you read and mentioned, we used the word guest advisedly. These should be invited guests of individual Oakmont members. That's the rule. And I can't believe that under this situation, that's what you're going to have.
How do you enforce that?
Well, not only that, but you said yourself they were coming in through the kiln door. So that tells you right there that they're bringing people they were knowingly violating the rules, and they knowingly were supposed to do that, and now we're sitting there trying to sugarcoat it. You can't do that, I don't see. I'm sorry, Ms. George, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, there may be a simple way to do it if we wanted to acknowledge it, and I see the application does say some invited guests. Is that the art room doesn't accommodate 50 or 100 people. That if we wanted to allow this artist to do what he plans to do, he must have a sign-in sheet with those guests who are guests of our residents, and that has to be turned in every week or whenever he holds his classes, that they mark the name and guest of, and so we keep track of it that way. It can't be a lot of people. I bet it wouldn't be 15 or 20 people.
The point is, it's not the number of people, it's the percentage.
That's
That's
right.
what they look at. They don't sit there and say, how many people are you going to have? I'm going to have 200. They ask you, is this activity going to be primarily Oakmont residents or the public? Number one. Number two is, they've already showed a propensity to break the rules and ignore our rules. So you're sitting there now saying, well, wait a minute, we'll let them sign in, and, well, by the way, I know Herm Herman put his name down as your guest. Come on, I'm sorry. Once again, they break the rules and they're going to come back and have you do it. And the fact that you tell me that the guy, he can't do it because he's not making money, we're not here for him to make money.
No, and I agree with you.
All right.
I agree with that. That is a point that I certainly agree with you. I'm just making it that if we want his services and we are willing to concede that he could have this privilege, it would be monitored, and it must be on a class-by-class basis. That's my point.
Well, I maintain that monitored or not, people coming from the outside, no matter what number, are not invited guests. They're paid participants, and there's no way around that. I don't care what color you paint it. It doesn't change the facts, and that flies in the face of our regulations. We cannot allow this.
Any other comment?
Yeah, on page 75, down near the bottom, it makes mention that I would like to submit a new application under the guidelines you explained to me today, and will do so before the November meeting. Has that happened?
Well, that's his application that you're looking at on page 76.
So that's the current one?
I know, but I didn't know it. That's his current application.
Okay.
In other words, I'm not arguing his position, I'm just trying to be sure that I'm communicating clearly what is going on here. He and those in the Art Association that would like to have his classes offered are saying, we understand, we let it get out of control. And so we're giving you a new application that will communicate to you our commitment to have this class consist of Oakmont residents and some invited guests, and then they indicate the percentage of members who are Oakmont is 51% as a minimum. So I'm not arguing that we should approve it or shouldn't approve it. I just want to be sure that you all know what the background of this is.
If we read what this gentleman has said, I think that this is a declaration of intent now that we can hold him to, because he now knows the circumstances. And he says explicitly, I do hope Thursday afternoon will remain available. It is my hope that the class would begin with the new year, a fresh start. This would also allow time to organize everything properly and make sure that any outside painter is a personal guest of a specific Oakmont resident. There at least is his intent.
Well, I think that, I apologize for getting into this discussion without asking for a motion. Let's see, do we have a motion at all to approve this application?
I have a motion to disapprove this application.
Out of order.
That's out of order.
Okay. I just did.
No, the chairman was asking for a motion to do it. That's the thing that you have to act on at this point. Now, you can let it die, and then when he gets nothing, then you can make your motion.
So I'm just asking, do we have a motion to approve this application? Evelyn moves that we approve the application. Herm Hess seconds the motion to approve the application. Now let's see if we can get on with that course of action. Bill, do you have a comment?
Yes. We spent a year with an ad hoc committee to determine guest pump was one of the big issues. You made a decision some time back to follow the resolution. It's pretty simple. It's for Oakmont members and their guests. Now you're trying to find, some of you are trying to find a way to bypass that. It's pretty cut and dried, and it's been expressed by a majority of you at the board here. It's pretty simple. You are a guest or you're not a guest. In this case, they are not guests. They are outside people using our facilities. I just wanted to sort of reiterate what we spent so much time trying to come up with a resolution that would answer the problematic issues that come up. So anyway, that's all I just wanted to say.
I do appreciate your comments, and I agree with you. I'm just saying that this man's intent is not now to break the rule or to bring in outsiders that are not authorized. And by that statement, with the fact that he wants a fresh start, that he would approach his classes on a legitimate basis tied to the rules that we have in place.
It seems to me, William, that you need to clarify something for me from the hard work that you did. Because I'm reading your document here about OVA-sponsored classes. It says guests at OVA-sponsored classes must be accompanied by a sponsoring member who is enrolled in the class. All guests must comply with all requirements for attending the class. OVA residents have priority in signing up for classes. Now, what is it that you're trying to say that you think this request violates?
Yes, I think it violates the principle that we're trying to determine here. But if you wish to take the time to monitor these things and have a process of policing who is a guest or who is an outside user, you're just opening up, if you open it up again, you're going to have problematic issues that you're not going to be able to deal with. You as a board aren't going to be able to deal with it. It isn't worth the effort to go to this extreme. These facilities are for members, and that's the way it should be. Now, whatever you come up with as a principle to get around this, and this obviously, I'm not against the fact that this gentleman might like to come in and monitor a class for art. I think it's a great idea. But you're opening it up yourself. In other words, you set a precedence again where if the next person coming in is going to want to do it, you're going to run back into the same problems you had before, and that is misuse of the Oakmont member facilities, that's all.
Okay,
you don't want to do it.
Thank you. Any other board member discussion?
Call the question.
Jean Whitridge had a comment. She was waiting a moment.
I'm so nervous. I never thought I'd get up here and see that. I can't take it anymore. I have two issues with this. Number one, how are you going to decide if you do this, who is a good painter, who is a good teacher, you're going to have billions of requests for this sort of thing, and how do you decide who you're going to let do it and not? But my other thing is, all the organizations and clubs here have a limit. What is it, 10%? That we can still use the facilities for free. And if is it 25? It's between 5 and 10. Why do we let some other thing, whether it's a class or whatever, exceed that 10%? As a Cal Alumni Club member, we cannot have more than 10% outside members to that club, or we lose our use of facilities. So I don't understand why you would bring in a business and allow them to have more than 10%.
Thank you, Jim.
Here is your problem. I think you have missed it so far. I believe Mr. McDaniel is a resident of Oakmont, is he not?
Absolutely.
Well, in that case, he can call everyone that wants to take his class a personal guest of his, because he's an Oakmont resident and he can have guests. So he can bring in, if you have 20 people in the room, he can bring in 9 guests. If you have 19 people in the room, he can still bring in 9 guests. Unless, and I believe somewhere in that policy, it's been, 8 months since we turned this into the board. I believe there's somewhere in there that says guests have to be a reasonable number in our guest policy. And therefore, what is a reasonable number in a class of 20 for guests? 1, 2? This is where your problem lies. If he's a resident, he can bring in guests, but now we get into the question again of what is a guest, and as the committee tried to do when we came up with these revisions was say a guest was a personal guest of the member, and that is tough to spell out. We thought all along that a personal guest is someone who's visiting. A guest is not a friend who lives in the area, and therefore you can invite over once a week to do something. Where does this area stop? This is a very gray area. We've never come up with a solution to it, but it's something you got to think about in this case. Because the instructor is a resident of Oakmont, and this makes a huge difference.
Before we do the call to question, I hope you'll do here real shortly. The fact is that, yes, the individual is a resident, but he's also trying to conduct a business. And this is a nonprofit, and we're not here to help other people have a business. We're here for residential use and recreation.
We have a call for a question on the motion, which was to approve this request for a class. All in favor? I believe we had a motion that was made by Evelyn George and was seconded by Herm Hess to approve this application. And the call for the question is whether or not you want to approve this application. Correct?
Yeah. I just have a quick question.
No, you can't. You have called for the question. All in favor of approving this application, please raise your hand. Opposed? The application is denied. The next item on the agenda was the renewal of Johnson Controls contract. Can we go ahead with that, or does that need to be deferred?
I'd like to defer it because I don't have all the questions answered and I can't compare apples to apples.
Thank you. We'll carry over item 10J. Item K revolves two collection referrals that are identified on the agenda without a personal identification associated with it in order to protect the individuals involved, but we're required to take the action in an open session. Therefore, I need a motion to...
I move that we...
Wait, there's the first person that has paid in full. Second person?
Right.
Thank you.
I move that move forward with the collection of delinquent assets on the first item, X25-01. They're still in arrears. The other one, I believe, has been paid in full.
A second? Second by Herman. Discussion? All in favor? Say aye. The collection actions are taken care of. The unfinished business was the gift acceptance policy. At our last board meeting, Jim Kaiser asked for a review of what we had in the way of a gift acceptance policy, and I wasn't clear, Jim, on what further you might want to do. So included here, starting on page 105, is the information about the adopted after publication of the association's gift acceptance policy. Is that sufficient just to refresh our memories on that, or was there something further that you wanted?
No, you're absolutely right. I apologize, I forgot that, but this is sufficient, what we had.
So that item is taken care of as an information item.
I would like to make sure that this policy is in our handouts to everybody, that, to all the board members. Yes, please include it in the workshop.
You will all note that I skipped over the president's remarks in order that we could get to this agenda, not keep people sitting here who had things on their mind that they wanted to say. So we had an unusually long open forum. But I had some remarks that I wanted to share with everyone. And the first has to do with the publication that we've all received, which is the annual distribution of documents that the association is required to send out. And there is an error on page 25 having to do with the ownership transfer fees and the demand unit payoff fees that I wanted to review. The sales processing fee that is shown in the document says $225. It actually should say $200. The $125 fee for sales processing should say $100. You might think that that was a simple typo, but in my time as a director the past 8 months, things that frequently look simple really aren't. And the life of us as volunteer directors often turns out to be more complicated, and this is an example. On August the 15th, our accounting firm Condominium Financial Management sent a form letter to all their clients, not just OVA, giving a 30-day notice of fee increases. Our former manager directed staff to scan the information into our records and file the letter. No distribution was made and no notice was given to our local real estate offices, and our fee schedules were adjusted. During the last week of October, I was assisting with Cassie Turner's transition into the new OVA manager role when a call came from a local realtor preparing to close escrow the next day, complaining about processing and demand fee increases and lack of any notice. Investigation led to retrieving the August notice from the file, carefully reading our CFM contract. It appeared to me that these two fees were locked in through June of 2014 by provisions of our contract with CFM, so that they had no license to increase them. Cassie contacted CFM to try and quickly resolve the matter. They disagreed. So further discussion with our new manager led to a requested review by our attorney, and his written opinion confirmed our reading of the CFM contract. So a follow-up call was made to CFM ownership to advise them of our legal opinion and get their fees for Oakmont real estate transactions reversed, and an agreement to adjust those that had closed since September 1st. The annual notice materials had already been at the printer, so they couldn't be changed. But it just goes to show how a simple little entry like that can involve a heck of a lot of work. Unfortunately, not a simple one, because we had to pay an attorney's fee to get an opinion to validate the contract we had. And I personally am greatly disappointed with CFM's approach to this kind of situation. No, the notice that is in will be in the Oakmont News, and contacts with the realtors will suffice.
Some time ago, in regard to CFM, we discussed the fact that we were going to completely review all of our financial contracts sometime this year. I think this was done early in the tenure of this particular board. That possibly should still be on the agenda for some time in the future.
It's very much on the agenda of things that I have brought to the attention of the manager. When we get to it is still a question of how it fits into the schedule. And I'd like to talk about one other thing from a financial point of view, and that's our 2014 budget. In the past month, we've received questions, and the social media has carried comments about how we adopted our 2014 budget. In the mail last week, you all got a copy of that budget because it's part of the annual mailing. I thought if I took a few minutes to review that process, it might be a good reinforcement about our efforts to be transparent. During July and August, the Treasurer and the Finance Committee worked with Condominium Financial Management to develop a basic budget proposal and make numerous adjustments to reflect changes that have taken place during 2013 and are anticipated in 2014. On September 17th, the Treasurer made a full audio-visual presentation to the board and the community as part of our monthly meeting, and that included a budget recommendation that would require a monthly dues increase of just 50 cents. Directors studied this draft recommendation in preparation for a required formal budget approval on October the 15th. In addition, we received letters from former directors suggesting consideration of a larger budget contribution to the asset replacement fund in light of the general aging of our recreation facilities. Those letters point out that we have had little or no dues increase in recent years. Directors also used the month between the first Finance Committee presentation and official budget adoption to look at the level of our asset replacement fund coverage relative to our 30-year facility repair and upgrade obligations. This thoughtful resident input and director research led to my making a recommendation to the board to budget an additional $100,000 in asset replacement contributions in 2014, along with recommendations by others to reduce a couple of small items. And the result was a net dues increase for 2014 of $2.50 a month, rather than the 50-cent increase recommended at the initial September Finance Committee recommendation. I have no other business on the agenda. Do we have future agenda recommendations from members of the board? We have taskmaster items.
I have task number 1, that OCDC is to at least explain to the board what page 19 is about, their minutes raised by Director Herman.
Thank you.
Next item, Jim Kaiser asked that the OVA staff remove the class, committee, whatever it is, NIA, from the approved group list. Next item, association manager to propose to the board finding a person to support open space concerns. Next task, item number 4, association manager to write an article in the Oakmont News for resident comment regarding dismantling the PAR course stations. Task number 5, association manager to evaluate condition of the railing on the path that is the PAR course. Task number 6, John Taylor to announce liaison appointments at the next board meeting. Number 7, cost of keeping the central pool open to the association manager report the next board meeting.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn to executive session, which involves, as indicated on the agenda, a legal matter from the attorney, an architectural violation in 2 instances. Meeting adjourned.